Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Sisters podcast. Today, you're getting me, Gabrielle Celeste. Welcome back, and a dear friend of mine, Kelly Stevens. I am so excited for this episode, ladies and gentlemen, because my friend Kelly, we're going to get into all the things and all the details in terms of how we met, how we connected. But when I say that she is one of the most talented and skillful readers that I have ever met and worked with, I genuinely mean it. And I'm not just saying that because she's a fellow June Cancer as well. So anyways, Kelly, welcome to the show, my dear. So excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor. And I'm so excited to be here, especially since the inception of this show. I've been listening to virtually every episode. So what a serendipitous time now.
Oh my goodness, love it. So as you know, we like to play a little game, but before we get to those questions, let's just go ahead and maybe if you want to, share how you and I met and connected and have even met in real life and spent some time together.
What a good story for all of those. Yes. So setting the scene, it was August of 2022. It's crazy that it has flown by so fast. But I remember we were in Nikki Novo's cohort for Soul Teacher. And I think within the first couple weeks, all of the students were pretty shy, trying to find their own voice. And then there was just you, like asking all the questions, doing all the things, stating what you were. And I was like, wow, like I want to embody this level of confidence. I just remember you were like, I'm a psychic. I do these things like this, just asking all the questions. And I loved it because personally, there is like this block of my ability to come out and kind of ask that or be seen, and not with you. Like it was just no bullshit with you. You're like, yep, this is what I am. And then it was during the practice groups where just like your energy is so loving and so caring, and then just so also extroverted. Like you're just like that friend that wants to be friends with everybody, and you're going to make everybody feel like at home. And you were just saying such polite comments and stuff, and we started really jiving. And then I guess the rest is history, and spent some time out in San Diego with you, soon to be your new home, and got to see how little you are in person.
Yep.
But it's been a pleasure knowing you and going through this experience and watching your development, because obviously you were just starting your psychic career. Like you had been receiving downloads, but it's been such an awesome journey to watch you not only evolve your astrology career, but into it with intuition and podcasts. And give me some of the generator energy, please.
Oh, we're going to get into all of that. Over here, she's just gassing me up, you guys. I'm like, oh my gosh, my Cancer heart. But you, my dear, are also a fellow Cancer. And also, thank you for saying those lovely things. I promise you, like in general, you guys, and overall, Kelly is a beautiful human being. Definitely starseed herself, which is going to be the topic that we are getting into today. But before we even go there, my dear, will you please share what your big three in astrology are?
Absolutely. Like you said, Cancer Sun, June Cancers, and then my Leo rising, and my struggling Virgo moon.
So fun fact.
Perfectionist.
You know, I have personally chatted and had said we've agreed that I think aside from Scorpio moon, Virgo moon might be the hardest moon to have for sure. And I would also say, I've made reference to this throughout several other episodes, but you and our mom, have the same big three.
Yeah. So you get me really well. You get to see it all the time.
I understand, and we vibe. Except she's a July Cancer, and we're June Cancers, and June and July Cancers, we're just built different. So
we're built different.
We are. Okay, so what is your human design makeup?
Yeah, I'm a 3-5 projector. So I fail a lot and learn from it. I have to learn through my failures. That took a long time to really settle into.
You're like,
And then the projector, you try to fit into that 9-to-5 lifestyle, and you're like, oh my God, I have no energy ever. How can I do something about this?
And then are you an emotional authority? Or you
I am. Yeah, I'm an
yeah.
emotional authority.
What's that like? I just feel like emotional is kind of hard to have because if you're like 80% yes or no on something, you're like 100%, right? That's my understanding. I think Jazz had explained that to me one time. Even said it on the
This is
show.
where human design resonates, but not enough for me to really be able to define it. I found more interest, I would say, in the gene keys because I think there is a little confusion for me in HD. For me, the biggest thing I can say is I need to not make a decision or reply to anything whenever I am in a highly emotional state, because that is not going to be a very clear, concise, proper message from me.
Mhm.
So I've learned that I need to answer and reply in more of a neutral state, and that will lead me more to success than I'm very much ruled like Tuesday, I might be really excited to do something, but by Friday, I'm just like, I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, I would have to say that of the authority types, I would say that emotional is the most fascinating to me.
Mm,
And maybe just because I understand the police, especially being like a sacral generator, because it's like a yes or no, or ask me later if it's not either one of those two. But I'm fascinated
mm,
because I feel like there's so much depth to that. And that is certainly
mm.
what I've noticed of those who have that within their makeup. So yeah. Love that for you though, because I do feel like, and obviously we know this, you have so much depth and wisdom. And I'm not just saying this, you guys, she is truly one of the smartest people that I know. We were hanging out in San Diego in my soon to be home, and it was me, Chelsea, and her, and Kelly was just, like, sharing all of these, like, bouts of wisdom, and I'm like, "Kelly, like, how do you know this, and how does your brain retain all this detailed information?" It's fascinating.
It's random useless nuggets usually.
It's that Virgo moon.
It's that Virgo moon that never feels fulfilled.
Okay, so moving on, what are some of the podcasts or audiobooks or just anything that you're listening to or absorbing and digesting at this time?
Absolutely. I obviously Spiritual Sisters podcast.
Mhm.
I would say that I spent a really good part of my life always listening to something. And oddly enough, my life purpose, my gene key gate is 52, and that's stillness. And so, what I've been really trying to lean in towards is less time on my phone, less time listening to things. I'm really trying to invite more solitude and silence in. But when I do want to listen to something, it has to do more with like topics versus the podcast itself. I do subscribe to some, but I'm not like a religious listener. But I'm really fascinated right now with frequencies and frequency healing. So anything I can get my little fingers on. Or, of course, aliens,
Oh,
paranormal,
we're so
of
going
course.
there. I love that. Yeah, and as soon as you said that, I was like, "Oh, the Healy device," and I know you and I have chatted a little
Healy's
bit about that.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many. Once you like get involved, you're like, which one do I even go with now?
Totally. Okay, so if you could work with any client, if you could read for any client, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Do you know who Peter Crone is?
I feel like that's like a name that's referenced in books. I don't know other than that, no.
He is he calls himself the mind architect, and I don't really know how to describe him other than the fact that he really does the work. And if you go and you work with him, like he is a high value kind of guy. So, but if you end up having one-on-one sessions with him, he really breaks it down the way that you think. So, he listens to the way that you phrase things and speak about things, and he is just so transformative in that space. I would love to read his energy and see where that's from. That would
And
be so, and if you, this is, I obviously do not personally know him, but if you haven't heard of him, he's so transformative that I would highly recommend just like listening to like one podcast he's
yeah, I must Google this man after.
been
If Nicole were here, I would be doing it while she took over the questions. So,
on.
as we usually do. Still in the, I was doing the math and I'm like, well, we're going to be at 100 episodes at the end of November 2024. And
Oh
we're
my God.
still, right? We are still on the Hot Mess Express train. So, This is neither here nor there, but yeah.
You're always learning. As a 3 line, you're always learning.
Yeah,
And a
totally.
Virgo, you're always learning.
I love it. And okay, final question. If you could go to any concert of an artist, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
It's so funny because he was just here in Denver and I had the opportunity to go and see him. But the thought of seeing this artist in a mega stadium, I do not want to. Like, I want to see him on like a rooftop deck in London when he's playing to his friends, and it's Fred again. I love Fred again. I just don't want to see Fred again in like a festival or big audience
Yeah. And that's
arena.
the EDM genre, right?
Yeah, he remixes it's technically EDM, but he'll remix different things. And so it's very different than what you usually hear.
Hmm.
And then he has like this he was like one of my top artists to be played in 2023 when I was over in Europe. And he's that reason because one of his albums is so calm that I would fall asleep to it every night.
Oh, I love that. Was he
So
playing at
relaxing.
yeah, was he playing at Red Rocks?
No, he played at the Ball Arena. So
Okay.
that's where like Taylor Swift would book a show. That's
Yeah.
where the hockey's played at. I'm just like, that's too many people. When you do this work, you start to get really sensitive to that many people. And
Mhm.
it's just really difficult to be or put yourself in those situations and think
A
that I'm gonna
absolutely.
enjoy this.
I
You're probably not.
couldn't agree more, and I was just it's actually funny because I feel like anytime we talk or, just in passing with one of our many conversations, you've mentioned a lot of the concerts that you've gone to, and I'm always so impressed also by your eclectic, um, universe, I would say, of musical taste, and so, yeah, it's always fun to hear just you speak and to listen from you, and I feel like that's a and by the way, thank you for playing our game. That's a nice little segue to just the topic of discussion that we're going to jump into today. But to kick us off, I would love for you to share how you got into this work and also the focus of your readings at this time, because given that 3-5 nature of yours, you have
Mhm.
so much of a vast history with what you've done professionally, what you've studied in school, and also just like how your readings go. And I'm certainly going to speak to my experience with the readings that you've so kindly shared with me. But yeah, I'm just going to pass the mic to you and we're just going to get right into all the things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for letting me play. As a little girl, I had a variety of what you would call, at least I called like paranormal experiences. And then I realized I was highly connected. So I was born as a twinless twin. My twin died in the womb. So it wasn't like a live birth. And I remember hearing that as a little girl because they are supposed to be incredibly connected to the other side. Now, I had really weird circumstances growing up. So I didn't necessarily know anybody that was psychic, didn't really talk to anybody about it. But I would be in my home and I would just hear, Kelly, Kelly. And I'm like, who's calling my name? So I'd go to my parents. It wasn't them. I would see ghosts. I had an ESP experience. And I remember this one time my mom lost a key and we were like frantically looking for this key. And I was a very good girl. We would go to church. And so I prayed to God and I said, God, show me this key. And then they show me this in my third eye. I see this armoire and it goes into a drawer and the drawer opens and then this bag picks up and it's full of keys. I just essentially know it's in here. My mom's in the kitchen. I run down, I grab that and I show her and I'm like, it's in here. And sure enough, key was in there. And so
Mhm.
she didn't really know what to do with any of these gifts. And it was all of those experiences that I had kept coming back to. And I would say by my mid to late 20s, I just felt incredibly unfulfilled. And that's when I started looking back into the books of like spirituality, Carolyn Miss's Sacred Contracts, really beginning all of that work of, okay, how do I tap in and divinely figure this out? And then in 2022, the summer, I was still feeling unfulfilled. I had always been drawn to like the psychic realm. I felt like it would be so cool to be one and anything's possible. And that's when I found Nikki Novo and you, and the rest is kind of history.
Mhm.
And in terms of the readings, It's funny because my year abroad, really diving into the work, the deep inner work and integrating my shadow, I would say the readings became much more clear, that channel. So anybody that is out there doing the work and it is really interested in psychic development, you can't forget that piece of self work, right? Because if you think about a river, if there's water running, but the river's blocked, it's the same thing with messages. And I always like to say, I'm just a channel. I'm just a clear vessel for these messages to come in, right? You're able to read these frequencies, read these energies, and just let them pass through you. And so I would say it really depends on the sitter of what I'm going to get, right? So if I can go in there with the intention of, we want to look at galactic Akashic records, we can then take a look at, well, where does your soul history come from? If we want to be a little bit more earth based for, the souls that like to stay in this realm, that's fine. We can then really identify, are there any past lives that are inhibiting your growth? Like, where are you struggling at? Where do you do well at? I never want a reading to make someone feel bad about themselves. That's not the point or the goal. But if there are areas of opportunities that I see that you might be struggling with, and it's either clearing that frequency or that energy that is blocking us, bringing to light maybe past patterns that we just have to overcome and heal, or just your gifts and where you're keeping yourself small. Everybody has so many beautiful gifts, and what's unfortunate is society tells you that you have to act one way or do a certain thing, and that's simply not true. And I think right now is the epicenter of where you're realizing that people are done playing this game and this structure that has been built and it's not working for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel like now more than ever before, and I think it's going to be so interesting to see what 2025 brings us all. The collective consciousness is certainly having the mass spiritual awakening on a rapid, at a rapid
Mhm.
speed. And so it's really fascinating to see that happening to those around us. But I actually want to dive into you hit on a couple things, galactic akashic records, and we are certainly talking about the types of star seeds. But before we go there, can you tell me a little bit about the galactic records and how they're different than maybe just like a general akashic records reading? And
Yeah.
I certainly am going to speak to my experience with that via you, and also Michelle, who I know you've worked with, who is also a friend of the show and has been on.
Michelle's great. Michelle's so knowledgeable. I went through more formal training than her. She let me read for her, and the information that comes in is so fast. So I was like, this is sweet, but also probably exhausting. um, but yeah, so I learned from Debbie Solaris, and really, in my mind, there's no difference between the Akashic records, right? You don't access it differently. What it is the awareness, right? And sometimes that is our own biases. If we don't believe that something exists, we're not going to see it. So say I take you out to nature and I only ever show you this view and you don't ever see this view. Well, then now you can't integrate it. And so what the Galactic Akashic Records is allowing an integration of the soul's entire history, not just its earth-based history. Where
Mhm.
a lot of prior teachings and people that are going into the Akashic Records are saying, hey, you just have this earth history. That's not true for everybody. Now, not everyone is a star seed, but we've never had more star seeds on this planet than we do right now. And there are so many different star systems that they came. And the reason that they've all come is to raise the frequency of Earth, is to expand this consciousness, and it's ultimately be a service and bring in this enlightenment, right? So again, we've never had so many people wake up at this time. And we can get into this a little bit later, but Earth actually used to be in the 5D. But whenever Atlantis destroyed Lemuria, it dropped it into the 3D. And so for over 30,000 years at this point, Earth has just been trying to regain this 5D. And that's why you always hear like the 3D to the 5D, the 3D to the 5D. It is to come back into that 5D nature that we used to be in.
So I feel like we got to get a little bit into this just to lay that foundation. If you would be so kind as to share more details about that transition from the 5D to the 3D and now living in real time for us as humans going back to the 5D. And for our
Mhm.
listeners out there, I just want to preface this and say we're just out here to share different perspectives of what reality on Earth is. So we're getting weird. We're just asking you to have an open mind. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already have an open mind. So, Kelly, please continue.
Absolutely. And there's so many other people out there like Billy Carson, Debbie Solaris, William, no, is it? I'll have to think of his name, but he wrote a book called The Source Field Investigations. They all talk about things like this. But essentially, so moving back into Lemuria and Atlantis, these were really the seeded colonies. These were the first colonies on Earth. Lemuria was kind of the first one, and Lemuria represented divine mother goddess consciousness. So the divine feminine. It is where the starseeds that wanted more spiritually focused were. So parts of like where Hawaii sits, that is where remnants of, and you even said it when you went, you felt the divine feminine there. That used to be part of Lemuria. It was over that like Pacific Indian Ocean area. And so who came down and seeded this were Pleiadians, Syrians, Andromedans. They all used those previous like constellations and places to live, planets, to model this type of living. And so Lemuria, it was in the 5D, and they really went through thought and intention there. They weren't exactly very technological based. And I remember being a high priestess there and having modalities where I was healing people with crystals and sounds and frequencies. And it was such an inspiring past life to review. And that's what sparked my interest in frequency healing. But so originally Arcturian and Andromedan ET groups come down, they colonize this planet in about 71,933 BC. And so there were other ones that were coming down to help seed, Lyrans, Syrians, Pleiadians. And ultimately, and unfortunately, it was destroyed by Atlantis. So pivoting over to Atlantis real quick, Atlantis was the father god consciousness. It was to represent the divine masculine. Well, the problem with Atlantis was really after Maldek. Maldek used to be a planet in our solar system and it blew up for nefarious reasons. Those souls came down to Atlantis. And from there, Atlanteans began to start war with Lemuria. Lemuria, being a highly evolved spiritual place, didn't rely on technology, where Atlanteans really did blend that technology with their spirituality. But unfortunately, it was those nefarious forces that led to that war. And then the 5D dropped into the 3D. And ultimately, what led to their own fall was their own civil war sparked through that. And what's interesting is any of the Atlanteans that survived that, they are thought to have resettled into Egypt. Look at Egypt. And then many of the souls who are currently in the US that have reincarnated here are thought to be reworking their karma from an Atlantean life.
That is so interesting that you say that, because so Lemuria is Pacific Ocean, Atlantis was Atlantic, right? And they're kind of opposite and on opposite sides, right? At least because I'm just thinking of the Bermuda Triangle and just with that, the conspiracy theory, which may not even be a conspiracy theory. Do we really even know? Surrounding that specific area in the ocean. And it's so interesting too, because I'm thinking of the first Aquaman movie where they pretty much like allude to certain locations in which Atlantis was in on planet Earth. So yeah, it's so fascinating. Yeah, I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, and it absolutely is. And, you know, the ultimate goal was to create a place known as Avalon. Have you ever heard of the name Avalon?
Just in folklore. My
guide's
from there.
Well, Avalon actually is a planet. Avalon was known as a utopian planet, and it was really modeled. And it is this beautiful duality blend of father god consciousness and mother goddess consciousness. And so the thought was, if you can have both of these places like Atlantis and Lemuria, then ultimately we can recreate Avalon. And it was actually tried and attempted by King Arthur as recreation. because apparently he was talking to an ET named Merlin, but it never got off the ground. And then you have
Okay.
people like Edgar Casey who have been apparently communicating with ET. So again, if this is too weird for you, totally get it. That's fine. But I believe in a little bit of magic, and sometimes you just have weird things happen that you can't explain.
Totally. I mean, the rabbit hole runs deep once you get into this world. This work is just really never ending. And it really just makes you think about like folklore and mythology and just stories. So, my guide, Morgan Le Fay, she has a direct connection to Merlin and Avalon and Celtic. Celtic or Celtic, we really don't know history. So, yeah, there's a lot there.
I
Uh,
feel it the same as Gaelic and Gallic. Like even the people who speak it, they're probably like, yeah, that's right.
yeah, totally.
Both are fine.
And you having mentioned that you spent a year abroad in Europe last year, I feel like you told me that they say both ways, right?
They primarily say Celtic over there.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. So I was like,
Mhm.
interesting
Yeah.
that we call it Celtic over here because I am of Irish descent and I
Mhm.
always called it Celtic. But whenever I was over there, I never heard one person call it Celtic.
That's so funny. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm gonna be sitting with that one forever just because we got called out by 2 people, so oh goodness. Okay, so star seeds. You mentioned that there are more star seeds incarnated on planet Earth than ever before, and I would love
Mhm.
to get into the different types. And before we go there, you had me thinking. So, by the way, guys, Kelly's chart, I've never seen a chart like it before. She has the coolest stellium in the 12th house. I won't get into the details, but it's so cool in the sense that like you can tell she's just connected to this other world that is ET and other dimensions and the divine feminine. So all that she's saying, I'm like, yeah, I believe you and I trust you. And there's just so much depth there. But what I wanted to say in a chart, you can actually work with asteroids to identify what starseed origin that you actually are from
Ooh.
and have. And I have an idea of where I'm from, although I don't really know because, apparently I'm in Talkin, but it's funny because I'm in Talkin asteroid in my chart is directly conjunct my Cancer sun. And as you know, Cancer is water sign, Mintonkin is a former water planet. So I'm like, I buy it. But um, yeah, there is a specific type of astrology. It's called galactic astrology that focuses just on asteroids that signify starseed origins. But please, my dear, go ahead and share your wealth of knowledge as to how many star seeds and types there are, and just even like the appearance and what they look like, and how it's so different from one another.
That is so fun. I did not know about that. And that
Mm.
would be such a fun little cool modality to check it because there always is that level of like, does this resonate? I mean, there are definitely times where I'm like, am I making this up? But you just have to have that conviction of it's coming in for a reason. So ultimately, again, star seeds are souls that did not originate on Earth. They have had lifetimes in other galaxies, other planets, other constellations. And the main reason of coming down here is really to expand that consciousness, raise that frequency. But a big thing is the third dimension is really dense and it is really difficult being here, especially because when you think about these star seeds, they don't often come from a 3D. And this is one of my disputes of when you go and look for something like an alien, they're not operating in a 3D. So you trying to find it in the way we exist is probably not going to happen. We know a lot of these exist in the 4D, 5D, even all the way up to the ninth and 12th D. So there's so many star seeds if we're being honest, but we're going to go over the main ones, and you and I are not a main one,
Oh,
so
okay.
this might not help, everybody.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there are going to be predominant star seeds, and we'll dive into that. And so the popular types are going to be Lyrans. So a little galactic history. Lyra was really that first seeded planet. And so Lyrans had felines as well as these more like white Caucasian looking humanoids. And so Lyra is really thought to be where human consciousness began. Now, what's interesting is of Lyra, whenever you really think about it, when you think about what Sekhmet is, the Egypt goddess, daughter of Ra, she's a lion head, right? And so I just love understanding the galactic Akashic records and then seeing how it's actually been documented through different cultures. But so Lyra was also a divine masculine energy. And these people are incredibly loving beings, but they are also more about the physicality. They really connect to nature. They really connected to their home. It was this beautiful, lush green planet filled with a lot of resources, but they weren't really that technologically advanced. What they look like, they can have feline features, like an affinity for cats is a big thing. You just will really connect to them. They have this pinkish violet aura, and it's especially related with the solar plexus. And then they're going to have an open heart chakra. They're very trusting. They have this childlike energy, and they love fairies and unicorns, dragons, all these kind of mythical things. And then their keywords are going to be ingenuity, survivor, pure heart, flexibility, and physical expression. I say survivor because this is where we're going to bring in the reptilians. The Dracos were from a different galaxy. They got kicked out of their galaxy and they came in. They were in need of resources, and so they befriended the Lyrans. The Lyrans were not as distrusting of them as they should have been, but they decided to change resources for technology because, again, the Lyrans weren't really advanced in their technology. And not long after that, the Dracos eventually killed 50 million Lyrans. And so a lot of the survivors, they fled and left, but something that you will see of those of Lyran descent is a possibility of this being really traumatizing in their soul body, right? And so it's not uncommon to have them feel kind of homeless. They generally do feel homesick. A lot of starseeds honestly feel homesick. You don't feel like you belong and you're looking for a home that doesn't exactly exist. So you do your best. But that's a big one with Lyran. And so Vega would be the next one. Vega was a star right next to Lyra. And they are generally blue beings. They look a lot like Hindu gods. They were feminine god consciousness. And so instead of that like physicality, they were a lot more spiritual, very healing. They have this light blue, calmer, gentler aura, and then they're a lot more receptive. So they can be very insightful, spiritual, healer, but a lot of these starseeds have been thought to seed humans around the planet. And it is thought that vegans seeded around India.
Okay.
Any questions so far?
Yeah. Are Lyrans associated with the star Sirius by any chance? Because that's like where my brain goes. And then
yes and no. They're associated because they found refuge after the wars there.
Got it. Okay.
So a lot of Lyrans will have lifetimes in other galaxies and star systems, mainly because Lyra, they slaughtered, the Dracos slaughtered everybody from there. So they had to flee.
I just want to say before I let you continue, listeners, can you tell she has a Virgo moon? I am absorbing and taking so many notes over here, and I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. I do have a question when you finish the types, because I think it's going to be prevalent for listeners.
Okay. And the next, nice segue, because the next one is actually Sirian. So Sirians are really beautiful, and there's actually 3 planets within Sirius. So they're all a little bit different. Sirius A, these individuals, they were kind of like humanoids, felines, and Osiris. They have a yellow-brown aura. Sirius A is actually the brightest star in the Earth sky, for anybody who did not know. It's a good one. Mm-hmm. And they were, and this is where your question comes back, their original inhabitants come from Vega and Lyra. So that they went to Sirius A. Sirius B is an aqua blue aura, and so they're more amphibious types of beings. They're very aquatic. And then Sirius C is going to be reptilians and hybrid beings. Now, they are the most grounded frequency out of all of them. They really initiated the awakening of human beings. They have been said to give us the ascended masters like Jesus and Mother Mary. They are the primary influencer of Egypt. What's really interesting is whenever you look at the pyramids, they match up well, I guess that's actually with Orion. The pyramids match up directly with the constellation of Orion. And then they're going to be associated with the throat chakra, and ultimately they're going to do service for others, gifted healers, responsible, practical. They are a bit more serious. So serious Syrians.
Yeah, I love the
Naturally.
pun.
Naturally. Next up is going to be Pleiadian. I know that a lot of people have heard about Pleiadians. Pleiadians have this, Pleiadians and Aldebaran. Aldebaran is kind of like Pleiades. Not quite, but they look the same too. So they're very fair. Think about like what the Nordics look like, blue eyes, like a whitish, very blonde hair. That's what the Pleiades look like. Very beautiful beings, one of the most touted for their beauty. But so they're highly evolved, most connected with Earth humans as guides and teachers, very bright energy, and it comes off as this turquoise, bluish green aura. They are very open-hearted, light and levity and lightness. So a really beautiful thing about Pleiadians too is they have this high level of empathy, one that probably is superior to others. They have optimism. They love animals. They hate routines, so they don't like a 9 to 5. I don't blame them. Very intuitive, emotional healing support. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people can identify with being Palladian, at least that I've with the conversations that I've had over the years from people that are into this work as well. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
think that it's because it's the closest star system to planet Earth, and so they're highly invested in the outcome of the 5D ascension. But please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's absolutely true. They are incredibly connected. They were one of the ones to help develop with like Earth and its development. They're very invested, but they did leave. So they do have kind of like this threshold, and they do want to help. But I've heard that Pleiadians want to help once humans stop threatening to nuke each other, right? So there is this level of they're kind of like we're not coming down anymore until you guys can elevate a little bit up. They're in a sense sick of our shit, which
Yeah,
like please help us. I don't know what we have to do with some of these people, but
totally.
yeah, they're highly spiritual, highly intuitive, great guides. So, and then we kind of take a trip over to Orion, which Mintaka is no longer there, but Mintaka was in the Orion star belt. And so Orion has a really deep history. Orion had its duality consciousness there because they have had so many wars. And much like the earth, how we feel like we go through spouts of like positive peace and oppression, there is this book, and it's called The Prism of Lyra, that really talks about Orion, how it was a breeding ground for a lot of nefarious things as well. It is thought that most of the dark energy and the dark forces in the galaxy is stationed in Orion. So the souls that come from Orion, really resourceful people. They are very loving. They understand duality consciousness because they've had so much war in their history, and they understand, when resources are scarce, how to mitigate that. They have this yellow-red aura, and is really aligned with the root and sacral, but they do have this denser type of feel to their aura. And what is cool is, they're really known for their optimism in the face of adversity. Apparently, a lot of comedians are actually Orions,
Okay.
which makes sense, right? Because a lot of people, whenever someone makes like a very crass joke, you're like, "Oh, you went there." Well, yeah, they've been through a lot of shit, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then we got a few more. So Arcturians are going to be the next. This one's prevalent, but not as common as the others. So Arcturians, this was the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They operated in 5D. They're emotionally and mentally advanced. So think about like a spiritual shaman or healer. have this angelic realm feeling, but they're very analytical. They can kind of be quirky, dorky, or awkward. And they spend a lot of their lives actually assisting others in other star systems. So again, it's that kind of guy, that shamanism. Being very analytical, a lot of them can work in science, but they'll eventually leave and go into something spiritual where they feel more called. They have a purplish indigo aura, and their crown, and this is highly related to their crown and third eye chakra. And then their keywords are spiritual guidance, analytical, and teacher. And lastly, we have Andromeda, and I have seen some misinterpretation on this. So there's actually two Andromedas. There's the Andromeda constellation, and there's the Andromeda galaxy. Very different. So the Andromeda constellation, these are, I wouldn't call them rebellious, but it's very much Aquarian energy. They aren't looking to fit in. They don't care if they fit in. They're very technical, but they can struggle with communication because they have always been in a telepathic race. They've always been a telepathic race. Very loving. Not every Andromedan is a tech head, but they love to work with energy versus like a physical type of healing. Their auras are going to be cobalt and indigo blue, and then they resonate with the higher chakras. They really are frequency navigators and technology innovators. And then lastly, you have Andromedan galaxy, and this is going to be sparkling auras, almost angelic. These souls are incredibly ancient and very old. They are billions of years old. They're going to be masters of frequency. They're really successful at whatever they choose. And lastly, like their keywords are magical, master manifester, high frequency co-creators. So I know you just had aired your aura podcast, but if you do ever see the sparkling aura, chances are it's an Andromedan galaxy soul.
So I didn't know the difference between the galaxy and the constellation myself. So that's really cool. And I feel like a lot of like starseed origin conversations have been like the people that I've spoken with that identify with being Arcturian or Andromedan. And I want to say, so we've had our friend Brett on, and his guide Orna, I believe she's Arcturian, which I think is really cool. But yeah, I did just have my aura read. We just dropped an episode on that, and I thought the picture that I had to taken in Salem was very valid, and I feel like you validated it too from what you saw in the energy read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
Oh, so, and I was just going to say, because it was rainbow, I was listening to something that was kind of like alien in nature as well. It's David Wilcock, I think his name is. And he was talking about how these Dalai Lamas in Tibet will meditate for like 13 years to receive this rainbow body, essentially. And then crazy things happen, like they can imprint their hand in stone because their consciousness is so high that it eventually like evolves into anything. It's like, and this is what's super fun for me to listen to, is to conceptualizing ideas that aren't going to be mainstream, but there is factual proof that will never be put out there. And it will always be suppressed by the media, because why would they want you to think that way? But believing in magic is so much more fun.
Oh my goodness, Kelly.
I mean, Scotland's national animal is a unicorn.
I did not know that.
Yep. And Wales is the dragon. How great is that?
Like, that came from somewhere. Like someone had to come up with that had a real life experience with a unicorn and a dragon. Like, come on now.
Right? Yep. I just love that they picked the unicorn.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm here for it. I approve. Okay, so I have a question. I have a couple questions, of course. So reptilians, those are the bad guys, right?
Generally speaking, so there's actually a caste of reptilians, right? And we see reptilians here. They are from the Dracos whenever you follow this lineage. Not all, so the top tier of class is going to be the dragon class, and not all dragon classes and dragon souls were bad, right? So My mentor, she did say that she had dealt with a few reptilians, but they were of the dragon caste, where the ones that are causing the most damage are generally the lower working classes, and yeah, they tend to be more nefarious in nature.
Okay, interesting. We don't want to engage with any of those. How how just knowing you and working with you and loving you, I know that you've had one-to-one contact with various types of star seeds. One of my questions was, how do you know if an extraterrestrial being is trying to get in touch with you? Like, what would that look like?
I think it's going to look different for everybody. But for me, how it comes in is very similar to my mediumship. And so whenever I go into a meditative space, when I'm in mediumship, it's not uncommon for me to see a past loved one in the peripheral or closer up. What's interesting with them is they make it very, very apparent. So if I'm going into meditation and I close my eyes, it's almost like they're right in front of me. And
Mhm.
from there, you kind of get a sense of, well, what do you want? Generally speaking, if they're humanoid, I feel more inclined to continue the conversation. I have had a lot that look more of what we think about like general EETs, right? And they're not grays, but there's something else. And from there, you can either set your boundaries. Again, if you work with your guides, you can bring someone in, kind of do that ID check. Who are you? What do you want? Restate your boundaries. I was once um, taken into like this one room, and it just did not feel right. I was like, okay, I'm going to leave. I just do not trust the feeling I'm having with this. And that should go for kind of any type of intuitive work that you're doing. Sure that, and that's why you set containers and set boundaries that even if they, even if you did the right container and everything, there is always that chance that if the energy does not feel right, follow that gut.
I agree. Um, so okay, and so how would you like? What are some ways aside from maybe using the chart and maybe having an idea of which star seed you might be? How would one
Hmm.
maybe identify the type of star seed that they are?
Yeah, there's a lot of different quizzes online. It is ultimately depending if you receive, like, if you're going to be a main star seed or not. Like you and I don't necessarily know if we would have been on any of the quizzes. I was professionally read by, should I plug her or not? I don't even know.
Sure. Yeah.
I was professionally read by Camilla from Anavora Wellness. She is a phenomenal reader for Akashic Records. And my soul is from Polaris, but I've hopped around a lot. So another thing is if you look at your aura and you see a number of different colors, there's a good chance that you spent a number of different lifetimes in places. I think sometimes it can be really helpful to understand and feel connected to what starseed you are, but there are parts of me that I don't necessarily know if it gets me any further in the goal. And because at the end of the day, we are still having an Earth experience. And so I think that that needs to be reminded with some people who overly identify with their star seed. That's great, but you were reincarnated for a reason, right? So I would say there are a couple different modalities, and then intuitively feeling, creating that line of space. If you work with guides, asking them, a huge portion and part of this is just acknowledging that it exists and then seeing what kind of comes in. Obviously, you can always book a reading with myself too.
Absolutely. And I cannot just recommend Kelly enough with her readings, even if it's not like starseed focused, which I highly recommend. But Kelly, so I don't know if I've ever told you this or when we hung out when we spent some time together in San Diego, but and I talk about this reading often. So I had a reading at the end of 2018. It was life changing. And he was reading into the timeline now, and I think even next year too. And I always say that you can tell how gifted a reader is and just what their skill set looks like based off of how far into the future they're looking or the different timelines as one area of expertise. And you guys, when I say Kelly literally read into the same timeline, years from now, in the present time as well, that said reader saw back in 2018, I just I'm very impressed by your skill set. So even if it's a different area, if it's future predictions, if it's health related, I can't recommend her enough, because that's something that Kelly didn't share on this episode, is that she has a history in health as, oh gosh, correct me, you went to study this and you have so much information about health because you literally listened to podcasts for 5 years specifically about health.
Yeah, Western medicine failed me. And that is one thing that you see with starseeds. It is not uncommon for them to have some health ailments and trying to figure out what's wrong. And so, yeah, 5 years, took a little bit of courses. I know a little too much sometimes where I can't listen to certain people now. I'm like, that's wrong. But yeah, well, thank you for saying all of that. And if you want to, I did a download for you, kind of
Ooh,
a part of your galactic. If you want me to
would
share that for
would
you,
love that. I Can I make a
all
guess
right.
before you share?
Yeah,
Okay. I think I'm in talking because I don't know where else I would be from.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. So what Gabs didn't share is many, oh gosh, maybe up to a year ago, I did this meditation with you, and I saw you were kind of this amphibious type of being, but you were standing on this rock and you just had this giant crystal ball, but you were next to like this ocean, and you were a queen of this place as well. So you were definitely in a rulership position there. Um, and it was just this regal energy. And I remember sharing that with you, which really does align with Mintakans, right? Because Mintaka is this water-based planet. From what it's mermaids, dolphins, but also I hear that Mintakans are. Where was I going with that? I was about to say something.
My origin?
Oh, oh, so they're really into astrology, crystals, all of these sorts of things that I was like, there's no way you're not Mintakan.
Hmm.
But so in this most recent meditation, Mintaka ultimately is no longer a planet. So a lot of these individuals, they need to be by water, which you have stated so many times, like you have to be near the water. And they're kind of like looking for this home. But so it was a really lovely planet. And what I noticed was that you began seeking refuge for your people because you understood the climate of what Orion was like. And so you didn't necessarily want to try to get a lot of them refuge within the Orion belt because there is so much war and turbulence there essentially. So there was this long struggle in the star system you were with, trying to facilitate a way out from them. And think about, like, I would think about this the way like Switzerland was so close to Germany during World War II. Or like Switzerland was still a good country, but there was a lot of stuff going on. That's kind of how Mintaka felt to be in Orion. And because of this inherent desire to help others, you just have this huge heart of love. And so you actually do have a higher frequency than most. And part of your mission is to transmute that energy because you aren't even aware of to the degree it's at. I don't know. So let's see. So a big part for you. Okay, here it is. So after Mintaka, you went to the Galactic Federation, and there was this sense of loss for you there because even though you were really happy that you found a lot of refuge, part of you felt like you left your people behind. Maybe that's why you feel bad when you eat sea animals.
Yeah, that's true.
My people.
I'll explain that joke after, guys.
But then, oh, and this is where I really sense that this is where you met your future husband, was on this at the Galactic Federation. He was a commander there, and I've seen that before for that. And you began consulting. And so I remember seeing this, but you consulted with a number of different star systems. You were trying to figure out like the embodiment of what is making this star system better than this star system. And so you had a number of roles within the organization, but ultimately it came down to you helping seed life on Earth. I remember seeing you in that formation of that council. And you spent a lot of time on the ship as well as the central sun. So ultimately, you kind of get bored of this because you really do miss having a home and having a planet. And there was a part of you because your physical self that you were originally born with was not a humanoid, but you were always really curious with humanoids. And then you begin to, yeah, that's when you began seeding Earth, and you've been involved with Earth since its inception. I'm getting a sense that you did both Lemuria and Atlantis. Not everybody does. Most people actually picked Atlantis. I don't know if I did Atlantis. I know I did Lemuria, but I feel like I'm getting a sense that you did both. And even if it was just like hopping between both. Um, and then, so, and I know that you have stated that this is your last lifetime on Earth. The funny thing is, like, your soul definitely let me know, like, it could be, but you can do whatever you want. You're like, it might not be. I can choose not to do that. It was very much like, no, I choose what I want in this afterlife. Like, I might have came in, but I might not be happy, so I might want to go back if things blow up.
Oh, so
Um,
funny.
you're incredibly tied to the benefic part of the planet. And that's just a lot of really good things in there, right? Because I also saw that for you in this lifetime, you really wanted to connect with millions to help raise that frequency and that vibration. And I do think that you'll be incredibly successful with that. And so, lastly, there are missions that you would like to do other than being on Earth, but what you're really bringing down is seeing the beauty in others and in life. You're creating systems. You're giving others to have a platform too. And so it's kind of like that generator energy is really paving the way, but it's not doing so in a destructive manner, but allowing for more flowers to bloom after you pave this way.
Oh my goodness, what a gift that was. Thank you. I'm going to be sitting with that and have to re-listen absolutely. And I just want to validate you as well because that's actually come up in a couple of readings speaking to past lives in Lemuria and Atlantis. And fun fact, if your Uranus placement is retrograde in your chart, more than likely you've had a lifetime in Atlantis. So,
Hmm.
So those are certain kinds of placements that you can look to just to see. But then also, it's funny because in that 2018 reading, he's like, "Yeah, your husband's former military," and I've always pictured him as a commander. And you and I have never once talked about that, so that's really fascinating. But you guys, I'm telling you, Kelly's the real deal. That's just a taste of what a reading would look like with her. It's such potent information. You will not regret booking with her. And Kelly, I'm just so grateful for you for coming on and for being in my life. And I've had so much fun today. I was going to cuss. I've had so much fun today. And I would be so grateful if you were to close us out with a card pull.
Oh, yes. And so today on our card pool, I felt like it had to be the Starseed Oracle
I mean, fitting.
by Rebecca Campbell. All right. So I set this intention to receive the card best suited for the Spiritual Sisters podcast. What is it Spirit would like us to learn and know? Always fun when you're like, okay, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Don't feel it yet. Oh, that one. Ah, what? I'm sorry.
What does it say on the bottom?
It says defenselessness, riding past wrongs, and uprooting. So let's see what this says. I've never pulled this one.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. Oh, actually, this is actually really beautiful. So it's saying here that we're living in divisive times, and when we're hurt and triggered, we tend to see things as a personal attack rather than an opportunity for healing. If we're to find true peace, unity, we need to drop our defenses and see things outside of right and wrong. As souls, we intrinsically remember unity and yearn for it here on Earth. Perhaps this is why it feels so painful when we experience the opposite. But it's crucial to remember that we can't simply bypass reality and pretend that unity, love, and forgiveness are here. This is one of the greatest challenges for starseeds. To bring about unity, we must first acknowledge the ways in which both we and the world have been divisive, personally, ancestrally, collectively, the shadows, hates, wounds, separations, wrongs, and sadness. You may be called to explore how you or your ancestors or how society has consciously or unconsciously inflicted pain on others, to find a way to drop the armor around your heart and to see that things are truly are for all people, to say I'm sorry with an open heart and mean it. So I think that's actually really beautiful, especially how you were talking about yesterday, or not yesterday, your pod that just aired. Of you can't be all light if you don't integrate the shadow. And integrating the shadow is truly a part of recognizing where we're still human, but we need to integrate those parts of ourselves that when we're triggered by something, it's an opportunity to make us understand why we're triggered. So if I triggered anybody about my aliens today, I'm sorry.
That makes, yeah, there's probably a reason for that if so. So, Kelly, where can people find you? Where can they book with you? Let the people know so that they don't miss out on a killer reading with you.
Thank you so much. You can find me at iamkellystevens.com, and Instagram is iamkellystevens.
Amazing. Until next time, do you want to close out and say bye with me since it's just the two of us today?
Absolutely.
Okay. Until next time, friends. Hope you enjoyed this one. It was a treat. All right. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.